Posted by you/carp1231. What's the creepiest / most unexplained thing you've seen in broad daylight? While this can be explained, the image still creeps me out to this day. It was around the time of planking craze. I had no idea what it was and hadn't heard anything about it. Got a taxi into town and was walking around the city center and life was normal. I then take a turn into the town square and there was around 200 people planking everywhere on everything. I don't know what was going on. I thought there may have been gunshots or a bomb. Or maybe the world was ending. I then asked someone next to me and they explained it and we laughed it off, but for that brief moment of time I'll never forget that uneasy feeling. I grew up in a pretty rural area of the United States on a decent-sized corn/soybeans farm that is about half and half farmland and forests. Naturally, my friends and I really enjoyed goofing off in the woods as kids right up until we all left for college or other post-high school endeavors. The land is kind of rolling hills, but nothing crazy, and most of the land in every direction we had thoroughly explored. There really wasn't many nooks or crannies left, but hands down the creepiest thing that ever happened was when I was out in the woods alone, of course, on a bright hot sunny August day. Now the forest behind the farm had an almost bowl-shaped topography to it, in that the middle was a depression that for most of the year was a swamp, which was very difficult to get through. Like I said though, I'd seen just about everything for a good distance into those woods, including this cool old blue car from the 1940s. It was some kind of Studebaker, that had been parked by the edge of the swamp at one point long ago. However, the borders of the swamp had shifted many times and on this particular day the car was sitting in swamp water almost up to its windows. This wasn't anything new, but what was new was the man, woman, Ike, sitting in the driver's seat. Whoever they were, they had long dirty blonde hair with colorful but dirty streaks almost like painted in. The best way I could describe it would be like if a girl painted her hair like an old times clown and then fell in a mud puddle. Of course this freaked me the fuck out as soon as I saw it, heart pounding, adrenaline pumping, the whole 9 yards. I was facing the driver's side of the car, and while I was scared shitless initially, I scrambled to the left towards, and somewhat away from, the front of the car to put some distance between me and the car, but I didn't outright bolt. Again, it was a bright, sunny, beautiful summer day. Nothing to be too afraid of. I mean, I thought I was pretty confident in my youth that I could outrun whatever was in that car. I peeked around the corner of a tree and with my new vantage point, it was immediately clear that it was just some old J.C. Penney mannequin with a wig on. Still creepy as fuck as it hadn't been there ever before, but I had to admit whoever put it there had got me. Then it turned its head and those pupil-less cold eyes looked right at me. Long story short, I Usain bolted all the way back to my house and locked everything down like Fort Knox. A few weeks later, after my friends telling me I was full of shit, we went back to the car, again in the daylight, and it was still there. Numbers breed courage, I guess, and we went right up to the car and looked inside. It was definitely just a dummy, and it had some kind of MacGyvered fishing line contraption that one could crudely control the dummy head with. The line ran out the other side of the car and around back of a tree a little ways into the swamp. Someone was there that day, and they knew I was looking at the car. I used to live on a farm, and one morning there was a full horse leg on our driveway. Like still had part of the hip attached and was fresh. We sprinted down to our horse paddock to find all our horses completely fine. We disposed of the leg and never got an explanation. Very creepy. This happened in Canberra, Australia, so there's no mountain lions or bears around here. Me, my 2 brothers and our uncle were running down the lake in his boat on a beautiful summer's day. Blue sky as far as the eye can see. Until we looked towards the North Shore line, and saw a smallish passenger jet flying low. Until it went below the tree line and disappeared. We were flabbergasted, because our family has been in the area for over 100 years and there is not an airstrip in that direction, anywhere. There was no loud bang. No fireball, nothing. No way it had crashed. We still don't know how it was possible, that it did what it did. When I was about 9 years old, my mother was driving us 4 kids home past a school. Suddenly from the other side of the road there was a screech and a school kid my age went flying into the air, then landed in the middle of the road. My mother stopped to see if she could help. The injured kid was facing our direction about 10 feet away from me. I leaned out the car window to see him. His shocked gray eyes opened wider as he looked straight at me, mouth slowly opening as if trying to speak. It was like he was trying to tell me something urgent. He didn't show pain, his head was twisted the other way from his body but no blood. The kid kept staring at me and I could not stop looking back at him. I felt that I could not even afford to blink or I would let him down, that I had to keep meeting his eyes and hear what he wanted to say. Oddly, no adults touched him, like they were afraid to go too close. Or else they could see what I could not, that he didn't have a chance. My mother realized she had 4 kids watching and we heard an ambulance on the way, so she drove off. She wouldn't listen to my plea to stay. Now as an adult I get her reasons. But at the time I was devastated to leave a fellow school kid lying in the middle of the road with nobody. To me he wasn't yet dead. His eyes and mouth were still very slowly opening wider. Decades later I can still see his shocked eyes looking straight at me, trying to tell me something. It was 1984, I was 15 years old and was alone at my older sister's house. It was late morning, I had just got out of the shower, still wrapped in a towel when I heard a noise outside. I looked out a window and watched a complete stranger tying the doorknob of the main entrance to the railing of the deck with a rope I used to walk the dog with. He then leaned a mop, that was on the deck, against the door. I called my sister, told her what happened, got dressed, got the heck out of the house through a different door and hid in the bushes until police arrived. The house was somewhat remote with no close neighbors. Found out later the door he tied up was unlocked. No clue how long he had been lurking around before I knew of his presence. To this day we have no idea who that was and what his motives were. Beyond creepy, definitely unexplained. On a trip to Gulf Shores, Alabama. Stopped to gas up at some run-down gas station that was also a truck stop in Mississippi. Went to the bathroom and as I'm standing at the urinal I had the strangest feeling that something was off. This strange feeling overwhelmed the entire left side of my body. I don't claim to be supernatural or have any weird feelings/premonitions and I have never experienced that feeling before that day or since. Anyways, I get up on my tippy toes to look to my left where the stalls were located. There was this deranged looking white guy with nasty, greasy ass hair and a fucked up scowl on his face staring directly at me. The most typical looking psycho killer you could imagine. He had to have been standing on the toilet because I could see his whole face and the upper part of his shoulders. Immediately zipped up and got the fuck out of Dodge. Didn't even wash my hands. This is my dad's story, not mine. In the 80s, my dad was in the Peace Corps and lived in Sierra Leone for 3 years. He had a motorcycle, or some sort of motorbike at least at one point, and would ride around the roads when he had free time. One day he's riding a dirt road that snakes around a small mountainside or hillside past some construction works. About half a mile after the road work, he sees a man on the side of this dirt road on the mountain/hillside just laughing his butt off. And he was blue. Not like painted blue, but blue. At first my dad rode on, thinking nothing of it. And then it sunk in, that he saw a blue dude sitting on the side of a dirt road laughing wildly. He turned around and rode back to where he saw the blue dude and there was nothing there. He kept retracing his path beyond the roadwork and never saw the blue guy again. Later that day he went back to the village he was living in at the time and told the locals about what he had seen. The locals all laughed and said, essentially, no you didn't. White men can't see devils. I believe there is a name for this phenomena, but I would never know how to go about Googling such a thing. But this was around 2013 or so, and I was having a smoke in front of my apartment on the front steps in the middle of the day, around noon or so. I got up to head back, and just for a few fleeting seconds while looking at the building, it looked totally unfamiliar. I knew I lived there, I knew it was my home, I knew I had just stepped outside only 5 minutes previously, but my brain was giving me some kind of indication that I had never seen this place before and that there was danger inherent. I just kind of violently wagged my head back and forth, like an aggressive no gesture, and was immediately back to normal. But I'll never forget that moment. It was like my concept of reality had very momentarily just cracked. I once had a dream I was walking solo down a familiar dirt path towards a wooded area. Side note, the path felt familiar to me in the dream. I had never been down this path before. As I walked toward the wooded area, the feeling of familiarity changed and the path ended at an old abandoned cemetery under the tree canopy. The familiarity suggested the path continued and the cemetery should not be there. I was drawn into the cemetery toward a specific grave. The detail was vivid. There was an old stone bench next to a sunken grave. The headstone had an angel on top. The remaining wing had a pine needle dangling off, hanging from a cobweb, drifting in the breeze. It was peaceful and quiet. I immediately woke up and felt like the dream was calling me back. I felt oddly connected. The jolt from waking up was so startling I decided to write the dream down. Fast forward a couple of years. I was considering buying a house with my girlfriend. After we reached a house we were considering, the realtor called and said she was running late. While waiting, we walked the outside of the house. Behind the house, we noticed a path past the overgrown grass going into some woods. To kill time, we decided to walk the path to the trees. While walking along and enjoying the sun on my face, I was hit with an intense feeling of déjà vu. I knew this place. As we reached the woods, there it was, the abandoned cemetery. It was the same cemetery in my dream. I told my girlfriend I'd visited this place in a dream and described specific details down to the pine needle. She thought I was trying to pull a stupid prank until she saw the sunken grave, missing wing and stone bench, and even the pine needle hanging off the angel's wing. She immediately walked back toward our car. The entire experience was a copy, paste of my dream with the exception of my girlfriend being present. Later that day, we were back at my house. She asked me how I knew all that detail. I let her read the dream I wrote down. I described the path, trees, cemetery and weather perfectly. She refused to ever talk about the experience again. That was around 20 years ago. The experience still haunts me to this day. I was maybe 14 to 15 years old and I would frequently sleep on the couch in our living room. We lived in a typical suburban colonial where the couch faced the front door. Since I could remember, we never locked our doors, as we lived in a pretty decent city. I remember one night I was still awake at 3 to 4 a.m. listening to music, when I saw a car quickly pull up our driveway. I then saw a very skinny, tall man open our front door, stand in the hallway for 20 to 30 seconds facing my direction, then leave the house and drive away quickly. I remember telling my parents and entire family this in the morning, and they did not believe me. My dad insisted it was him, as he'd leave for work in the early hours of the morning. I know I was young, but I also know that was not my dad, as my dad was stockier and shorter than this man. Freaks me out to this day to think what this man was going to do. Given there was visual evidence at the end, I think this might count? Okay, and this was the only ever unexplainable bad thing I've encountered. I'd been working as the visitor services manager at the Harriet Beecher Stowe Center for 3 years. My office was on the main floor of a circa 1872 carriage house. I mostly sat at the front desk, gift shop space around me, mini gallery behind me. This particular day it was a miserable rainy/sleeting March Tuesday. We'd had no guests come through the visitor center or tour the house. A bit before 5 p.m. I sent the 2 guides to close the Stowe house. Window shades need to be closed, some doors opened, some doors closed, etc. I'm now alone in the carriage house. That's pretty normal. I was alone always when the museum was closed to the public. What was not normal was the sudden stomping feet I heard just above me in the guide break room. Someone big was stomping around and moving things. Heavy things. Stomp, 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 thump. Stomp, 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 thump. We'd been broken into a month earlier. Someone had come in and taken the cash from the donation box and the cash register while I'd been across the lawn at a meeting. So I immediately thought the same was happening again. But that didn't make sense. I could see the main staircase from my desk, and the door to the other one was always locked. But the noise was continuing. Finally, I called up to the guide break room where the noise was coming from. The room should have been empty. It was a 2-way phone set to speaker. I could suddenly hear the stomping and movement much more clearly. There was someone up there. They sounded angry or upset. Stomping and heaving things. And then it came up to the desk. I could hear it panting. Moving papers. Frantic. I radioed security. Our security guard wasn't far away and marched up to the break room by the front stairs while I watched the back stairs. No one was up there and no one came down. Except Rod, our security guard. He's found nothing. We had motion detectors. Had someone hidden, they would have been caught. I know what I heard. I'll never forget hearing it through phone speaker as it approached the desk above me. Hear it breathe. No, it was not good. Not safe. Bad. Something very bad. My 2 guides returned shortly thereafter, and on the break room table was a big crumbled pile of plain white printer paper. The guides swore up and down that the table had been clear when they'd left to close the Stowe house. I should add these 2 guides were people I'd worked with for several years. Both older gals, and civil with each other but not great friends. I am certain they had nothing to do with this. I've bumped into things a couple times, always it was a curious experience. This wasn't. This scared me more than I think anything else has. It was evil. I went home shaken and sat in the Stop and Shop parking lot until my husband finished work that night. I was too scared to go home alone. We're at intersection near my house that about 3 months ago started to be torn down for being too dangerous, replaced by a roundabout. Funny thing is, it was a normal intersection, 4 directions, 2 lanes in, 2 lanes out with dedicated left turn lanes. Except, just about every week, someone crashed there. Every month we'd hear of a near fatality or worse. Police couldn't figure it out, so they started to petition for them to change it. They changed the light pattern and reduced speeds, which brought total crashes down, but here's the fuck thing, serious injuries tripled. It got so bad they posted cops permanently to monitor the intersection, and what they noticed was, if they watched the intersection, non-stop, Nothing would happen, but the instant you'd take your eyes off it, someone would speed through a red light or make a left turn on red. They then finally tried one last thing, remove 2 of the lights, in favor of stop signs on one of the roads. First day there was a multi-car pileup. Second day there was a minivan rollover. Third day the mayor's daughter hit someone going 50. Day 4, intersection was closed for construction. 2008 mountain bike race in the Midwest. It was 100 degrees that day. Almost no oxygen on the woods. It was a hot day. 3 of us were well ahead of the pack. We were about to lap another racer when he just rode off the trail and down a steep ravine. All 3 of us stopped. The ravine was steep and very deep. We found his bike halfway down. We never found the racer. They sent search party and found nothing. To this day he's never been found. When I was 12 I saw a black-eyed person. Not just dark eyes, but the kind of pitch black you see in horror movies where the entire eye is black. This was in 1995, before colored contacts were widely available, and I think they were like hundreds of dollars, so I've always found that explanation unlikely. So I'm at a huge water park in my city in the wave pool. My friend and I were on a double inter tube just splashing around when we ended up in the middle of the giant pool, bumping into other tubers. I look up and a few feet away is this guy. He's about 25 and he's staring at me. Not just staring, but staring into my eyes. Into my soul. It was a creepy stare, but not sexual or anything. It was just too intense. I couldn't look away for what felt like a long time. It felt like he knew what I was thinking. Definitely felt predatory in an animalistic way. I swear he had a small smirk on his face. After what was probably only a few seconds but felt much longer, I looked away and that was that. This is the interesting part, I think. Back then I never talked about it or looked it up. The internet was new and I don't think I even had an email at that point. I don't think I told my friend or my parents. About 15 years later I'm sitting at work and I remember this incident, so I decided to look it up online. I check eye diseases and the only one that it could have been said people generally couldn't be in the sun as it is painful. I saw the black-eyed guy on a sunny day at a water park, so that was unlikely. I then found a site about black-eyed kids, but that sounded too made up. I did find a handful of similar stories though. I guess I'll never know for sure, but it sticks out as one of the creepiest things I've experienced. When I was a little girl, I was playing in my room one morning with my sister. I looked out my window and saw a man staring in at us. I told my sister to leave my room and ran to get my father. He didn't believe me and thought I was crazy. Needless to say, I had an awful hard time sleeping that night. Throughout my childhood, I'd hear what sounded like footsteps outside at night. Or my parents' car doors opening long after they had went to sleep. Several years later, I looked at our house on Google Maps. I always assumed we lived by ourselves in the woods, far from anyone else. It turns out there was a small house that looked like it was being lived in only a few hundred yards in the woods from us. My family was less skeptical of my crazy stories after I showed them that. When I was a teenager, I was at a friend's house when his parents and family were not home. I was on his back porch tying my shoes, then I went back into his house. Tying my shoes, a 20 seconds action. No. I walk inside and his entire family is back home and they're sitting at the kitchen table eating dinner and they ask me what I am doing here. They're staring at me like I am crazy and asking why I just walked into their house. I ask for the time. They tell me it is 6:30 p.m. I lost an entire hour doing a 20 seconds action. To this day I still have no clue what happened or where the time went. When I was a teenager, I was at a friend's house when his parents and family were not home. I was on his back porch tying my shoes, then I went back into his house. Tying my shoes, a 20 seconds action. No. I walk inside and his entire family is back home and they're sitting at the kitchen table eating dinner and they ask me what I am doing here. They're staring at me like I am crazy and asking why I just walked into their house. I ask for the time. They tell me it is 6:30 p.m. I lost an entire hour doing a 20 seconds action. To this day I still have no clue what happened or where the time went. When I was 15, my family went on a cross-country trip and one night we camped in the Grand Canyon. We went to a ranger lecture around 6 p.m. This is summer, so it was still pretty light when we were walking back. We went off the trail as a shortcut and after walking a ways noticed a light up ahead. As we drew closer there was a man sitting at a desk in the woods with a lantern. Just a full wood office-sized desk in the middle of the woods. I distinctly remember he had long sideburns and feeling like he was dressed like a man from the 1800s. My dad backed us down towards the trail and we went on our way. The man never made a peep or looked up or acknowledged us. There were 2 adults and 3 teenagers and we all remember the event really clearly. I don't believe in ghosts or spirits but have no explanation for what I saw. As I got older, I figured I was misremembering, but everyone else in my family says they saw the same thing. I was standing on a street corner waiting to cross the street. There is a man there with a boy that doesn't seem to be his, but I think nothing of it. Then this other guy rolls up to the stoplight in a convertible, also with a young boy in the front seat. The guy in the car yells to the guy at the crosswalk, Hey, is that your boy? Nice." The guy at the crosswalk kind of smiles nervously and waves as the car drove off. And me and my friend exchanged worried looks, pretty certain we just saw two pedos giving each other the what's up in the street.